Hey y'all, it's me Sydney and welcome back to Planet Sid. Today we are going to be looking at The Shining and American Psycho and looking at the main characters and just exploring how false realities drive you crazy. So if you guys are interested in that, then stay tuned. So if you're here, I hope that you've seen The Shining and American Psycho because if you haven't, then I'll suggest that you watch it before you watch this video because there are going to be some spoilers. But the many times that I've seen both of these films, I've always wondered what's going on like behind their crazed and detached eyes. Like I always wonder, what is it that drove these men to insanity? And I think I figured it out. So first we're going to start with The Shining. Just to do a quick rundown of the plot, The Shining is about a man, Jack, and his wife, Wendy, and their 5-year-old son, Danny. Jack takes a job at the Overlook Hotel. They soon find out that the hotel seems to have some dark secrets and like some sinister forces, and eventually Jack goes on a rampage to try and kill his wife and son. So that's a very condensed version of the plot and everything that happens. But just to start from the beginning, from the outside looking in, whenever we first meet this family, they seem to be a typical, normal, happy American family. Jack was previously a school teacher and Wendy was a stay-at-home mom to their 5-year-old son, Danny. And so he took the job as the caretaker at the Overlook Hotel to get over his writer's block. He has a dream of becoming a writer one day, so he took that job for that reason. And so when we first meet them, when they arrive at the hotel, they're getting a tour of the hotel grounds and just like a rundown of what his job duties are by the employees that work there. And all of the employees, they seem to be happy to work there, and they're just telling him that you're gonna love this job and that this job is amazing and this hotel is amazing. So they all seem to be very happy working there, all the employees. And I saw somebody point out that in the beginning when we first meet the employees and Danny, their 5-year-old son, they're all wearing the colors red, white, and blue, whereas Jack and Wendy are wearing neutral earth tones. And I thought that was so interesting because I interpreted that as everybody, including Danny, representing the American dream versus the American reality. And I feel that the false reality is in a way both Jack and Wendy are upholding, as well as everybody who's wearing red, white, and blue, who's at the Overlook Hotel, and Danny. And so to start with, the people who are wearing red, white, and blue, they all seem to have this facade of them being happy employees and them being happy and thankful to have the Overlook as a job. So in a way, they're upholding this reality that the Overlook Hotel is actually this amazing place to work at. And then Jack and Wendy, who are wearing the earth tones, they, in my opinion, represent the other end of the American dream versus the American reality. Because in a way, it just represents like their naivete, because all of the employees are aware of what took place at the Overlook Hotel as far as the previous caretaker going crazy and then killing his family and himself. And the employees are also aware that the hotel was built on top of the remains of Native Americans. They do tell Jack and Wendy that, however, they in a way gloss over it. And since the employees of the Overlook are aware of the depth of the terror that the Overlook possesses, I just find it very hard to believe that they are actually happy to work there. But then again, since the Overlook does possess this supernatural force, they already are in a way like sucked into it and a part of it maybe. Whereas Danny, he feels that something is off because he possesses the ability to shine and he's able to communicate with some of the other hotel employees as well. But since he's so young, he doesn't really know how to effectively communicate that something is off. But the employees seem to be happy to work there, and they did offer the information of what happened to the last caretaker and that the hotel was built on Native American remains. And so I did notice midway through the film, whenever Jack is already possessed by the Overlook Hotel, he is seen wearing those red, white, and blue colors as well, which in a way signifies that he is. So midway through the film, I did notice that Jack was wearing red, white, and blue, and so I feel like that represents his transition into being possessed by the Overlook. And it's like the further that this film continues, the harder it is to uphold this false reality of the Torrances being this happy American family, and also the false reality of the Overlook being a good place to be at. And as the film progresses, we do find out that Jack was actually an alcoholic and was abusive, and he feels that his family is in the way of him becoming a great writer. Jack is deeply unsatisfied with the state of his life, and he takes that out on his wife and his son. And Jack is an aspiring writer, and he did take the job at the Overlook Hotel to cure his writer's block. but when he's there and he's still not producing any good material, he comes to the conclusion that his wife and his son are the root of his inability to chase his dreams. And there seems to be something about going after the fantasy of the American dream versus the actual American reality. But instead of dealing with that harsh reality that he just may not be a good writer, he convinces himself that his wife and his son are in the way of his success. And another reality is that the Overlook was built on top of Native American remains, much like the rest of the country as well. So there are some traces of bloodshed that the Native Americans have left behind. And I say this because in the beginning of the film, you hear Dick say that sometimes when things happen, they leave a trace behind. And he says that to Danny whenever he's answering his question about whether or not the hotel was bad. And so I feel like he was in a way referring to the Native Americans and the bloodshed that had happened and the fact that they were built on the remains of the Native Americans and what that means as far as some things that happened at the hotel. Because at the end of the day, Jack took a job as a caretaker, so that means that he's getting paid to watch over land that is stolen. And along with everything else that has happened at the Overlook Hotel, maybe there are some lingering spirits of the Native Americans, which I feel like wouldn't be a far stretch considering everything that has happened. And what I find so interesting about The Shining is Jack and Wendy's willful ignorance, which in turn caused their demise. And what I mean by this is that, of course, they were upholding this false reality of them being a happy family because Jack was obviously very abusive and very angry towards his wife and son, as well as before he officially took the job as the caretaker, they were both made aware that the last caretaker had went crazy and killed himself and his family, but they chose to stick around and dismiss all the red flags until it was too late. And you can even see this in the beginning where Wendy and Danny are getting a tour of the kitchen and Dick calls Danny by his nickname Doc, even though he shouldn't know that because they're strangers and nobody has referred to Danny as Doc before. Of course, he offers a flippant excuse, but Wendy just accepts it, even though you could tell just by looking at her that she is unsettled and that was kind of strange that he knew that when he shouldn't because he's a stranger. But even though she was unsettled, she just chose to accept that and to move forward. And there were a lot of other instances as well where there were red flags that there was something not quite right about the Overlook Hotel, but they chose to stick around and Jack decided to still take the job. And the Overlook Hotel in general is just a false reality because it seems like once you enter, there is no leaving and it is quite literally a false place. And this can be seen with the impossible window, the freezer doors, or the fact that when they're driving up and we get the aerial shot of the hotel, we don't see that maze, but we see it once they're in the hotel. So it seems that as soon as you walk in the doors of the Overlook Hotel, you are entering in a new world. So since Jack was already upholding this false reality of this happy family life to begin with, I feel like he was bound to go crazy, but entering in the Overlook Hotel only exacerbated that. So now moving on to American Psycho. American Psycho is about a young professional, Patrick Bateman, who lives in New York City, who is a businessman by day and a serial killer by night. And so in the beginning of the film, Patrick does this monologue and he talks about how he isn't necessarily a real person and that he's only a shell of a person. And the audience gets to see how perfectly he has crafted his persona in that bathroom scene whenever he's getting ready for his day. And Patrick refers to himself as merely an idea. And he goes on to say that he is simply not there. And you can see this whenever he's walking to his office with a very stoic demeanor, however he's listening to I'm Walking on Sunshine in his headphones. And so it seems that Patrick is very detached from reality. And he seems to just be going through the motions. And you can see this in literally any scene throughout the movies. Like when he's at work, he isn't really working, he's just kind of there. Or when he's in conversation with his co-workers, they all seem to kind of be saying the same thing, but nothing really at all. It seems that everybody in Patrick's social circles are just there to uphold this facade of them being young professionals living in Manhattan. And the thing is, Patrick is very detached whenever he's having any social interactions with others throughout the movies, but it seems that Patrick is only ever truly there whenever he's having sex with someone or whenever he's killing. And I feel that Patrick and the people who he was surrounded with as well can relate to the idea of the lights being on but nobody's home due to the emphasis that is put on wealth, pleasure, and excess. And so throughout this film, we do get to see that Patrick is very self-obsessed with how others perceive him. And he he has a very hedonistic approach to life, which makes sense considering the fact that he is a yuppie in 1987. And if you don't know, a yuppie is slang for the term young urban professionals. So this film took place in 1987, where Reagan was in office and Reaganomics were in full swing. So this meant tax cuts, higher military spending, and a free market. So all in all, that just means that poverty got worse and the wealth inequality gap only widened. So if you were considered to be well off during this time, much like Patrick Bateman, then your life was driven by consumer culture. And this meant the cocaine, the nightclubs, the fancy restaurants, and designer suits. And a lot of people during that time, and still even today, believe that the more you accumulate, the happier you'll be. So when the opposite happens, either you consume more or you find something else that brings you joy and happiness, or you go crazy. And I feel that Patrick goes crazy because he's so deeply unfulfilled by this life that he has attained that he was told will bring him joy. And also Patrick is just simply mentally unwell, and I don't want to gloss over that, like he obviously had something going on. What I found so interesting about Patrick is that he studies others, and I interpreted that as him studying others to in a way emulate the other people around him. But then he also so desperately wanted to differentiate himself from the other yuppies that he was surrounded by. And even in the film, he says that he has characteristics of being a human, but he doesn't really express any real emotions outside of greed and disgust. But then he also wants to differentiate himself from the other yuppies that he's surrounded by, because I feel that in a way, like, he is at the bottom of his social circles, even though he's still at the top of society because he is a well-off, rich white man. But I say that he's in a way at the bottom of his social circles because you can see in the film that when others refer to Patrick when they aren't aware that they're actually speaking to him, when they refer to him, they refer to him as if he's some reject. And even throughout the majority of the movie, his coworkers refer to him as Marcus and not Patrick, which understandably would take a stab at his confidence. But that only further emphasizes that just about everybody who takes place in like the yuppie culture, they're all indistinguishable from one another because they literally all do look the same, they all have the same haircuts, go to the same barbers, they go to the same restaurants, wear the same suits, have the same business cards. Like they are all literally the same people, but they all want to be indistinguishable from others because they want more wealth and power. But the thing with Patrick is that he isn't succeeding at this at all because along with him being indistinguishable from others, he also doesn't have any real personality traits, which in turn makes him angrier. So then he finds other ways to assert his dominance, whether that be through killing the very person that he felt threatened by. I'm referring to him killing Paul Allen, or by forcing people that are lower than him in society to participate in his false reality and eventually killing them as well. And I'm referring to the interactions that he's had with sex workers as well as homeless people as well. So Patrick lives in the false reality as far as having a life consumed by greed and excess, but there is no substance to that, as well as him just being severely detached from reality and him not being able to express normal, healthy human emotions. And I think that both Jack Torrance and Patrick Bateman are both in a way double removed from reality. And I say this because they're both in a way trying to uphold this American dream image, but they're also trying to work overtime and conceal the fact that they are both going insane. And I think what drives both of them crazy is a deep sense of unfulfillment. And I say this because The Shining took place in 1980, whereas American Psycho took place in 1987. And they were both in pursuit of this American dream, but that meant different things for those different time periods. The early 80s during The Shining, that meant just pursuing your dreams, no matter what background you come from, like everything is obtainable in a way. But by the time Reagan took office and Reaganomics ended up taking over everything, this culture of wealth and excess became the standard for what people should pursue. And the term American dream was actually coined in 1931 by James Truslow Adams, who said that, quote, life should be better and richer and fuller for everyone, with opportunity for each according to ability or achievement. And what I found so interesting about both of these characters is that, of course, they are both white men, so they genuinely believe that this pursuit of the American dream was achievable because in most cases it was. But this consumerist culture is what ultimately contributed to both of their downfalls, in my opinion. And you can see this in American Psycho, where the realtor at the apartment refused to acknowledge and possibly covered up a murder that potentially happened because they needed to fill the apartment space and they didn't want to lower the property value of the apartment. And you can also see this in The Shining, where the staff at the Overlook Hotel still chose to hire Jack, knowing and glossing over the fact that it was built on top of the remains of Native Americans, as well as glossing over the horrific crimes that have previously happened there, because they needed somebody to fill that position. And we as a society are told that if you achieve and accumulate certain things, then you'll be happy. But what about when you do everything right and you still aren't happy and you feel empty? Because Jack had the car, the wife, the kid, and the job. And Patrick had the beauty, the money, the job, and the lifestyle. Or maybe they're upset that they were sold a dream, because they both have the girls and they don't even like them. Jack obviously has some deep resentment and anger towards Wendy, and we can also see how, just in general, how he interacts with Wendy. And we can also see throughout the film that Jack envisions himself with another woman, so he doesn't seem happy in his marriage. And Patrick as well, he has a girlfriend, Evelyn, but he doesn't pay her any attention and he cheats on her constantly throughout the movie. So, and what I find so interesting is that Jack had a pretty average, normal home life, but he was still in his pursuit as far as him wanting to be a writer, whereas Patrick had a life of excess and was still unfulfilled. But they both had achieved what society had expected from them at their ages. Patrick was this young man who graduated from Harvard, who ended up working in some tall building in New York City, and Jack was middle-aged and he had a normal job and he had a stay-at-home wife and a quote-unquote happy home life. And so that's what they were told that they were supposed to aspire to. So when they did achieve it and they got to the end of it, they felt tricked in a way. I think that the fact that they are both white men is what makes their reaction so interesting. I say this because they both feel that they were sold the lie of the American dream, but instead of figuring out what fulfillment looks like to them, they rather lash out and take that out on others around them. And in my opinion, their lack of consideration for others and their individualistic mindsets is what drove them to insanity to begin with. But that's what their entire lives are built off of. Because on a larger scale, the culture of consumerism and Reaganomics is sustained by others exploiting people from a socioeconomic background that is lower than theirs. And you can see this in Patrick's poor treatment of sex workers and homeless people and other service workers. And you can also see this in Jack's treatment of his family and the lack of consideration that Jack has for the fact that he's taking a job where he's watching over land that was stolen and that was built on top of the remains of Native Americans. And it's the same lack of consideration and individualism that built this country off of the backs of slaves and the bloodshed of Native Americans that perpetuate this life that both Patrick and Jack feel trapped in. So their solution is to kill more people. And Jack and Patrick, they never thought to think how their own actions are contributing to their own and others' demises. So that is all, ladies and gentlemen. I hope you guys enjoyed this video. I really enjoyed making it, and thank you guys so much for watching. Also be sure to check out my makeup brand Box Office Beauty and my clothing brand Main Character The Label. And I hope you guys feel safe and seen wherever you are, and I hope you guys are finding joy and fulfillment on your journey of self-expression. Until next time.